leaders. Welcome to Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Duerre Live. I'm Lisa Duerre, your guide through the ever-evolving landscape of leadership and tech. We're breaking down barriers and bringing our community together in real time. So whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your office chair or catching the replay later, please know that your voice matters. Speaking of voices, that's what firm leadership is all about. Listening, inviting wisdom, and embracing the collective intelligence of our teams. Because let's face it, no one leader has all the answers, and that's where you come in. As we dive into today's discussion, please be an active participant. Drop your thoughts, questions, and insights into the comments below. This isn't just my podcast, it's ours. Together, we're rebooting Leadership Drive. And before we kick things off, I'd like to mention that this podcast and live stream experience is brought to you by RLD Group. As your host and the CEO of RLD Group, I'm grateful for the opportunity to collaborate and bring in this podcast to life. Together, we're committed to empowering organizations, teams, and leaders like you, and your engagement in this conversation is invaluable. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation, get comfy, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's make some magic happen. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Duerre, and you are here live on Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Duerre Live. How about we say that twice? Yeah. Hey, we're going to talk today about something that not only affects the bottom line, but it affects every employee in your organization, including you as the leader. It's about communication, and specifically mindful communication. So on this season of Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Duerre, we're talking about firm leadership, which stands for flexible, intuitive, resilient, and mindful. Firm leadership is the foundation in which we engage with our clients, in which the ways that we are consulting and delivering workshops, how we're coaching. And so today we're going to be focusing on the M, which is mindful, and we're bringing that together with the lens of communication. Because let's face it, back-to-back meetings, pressure is always on, your phone never turns off, the world feels a bit upside down. How do you as a leader be the most effective communicator possible? Because this matters. And mindfulness is a piece of not getting triggered, being clear on your intended outcome, and bringing the best of you in those communications. So I'm going to drop a statistic here, and then I can't wait to bring our guest up today. But the statistic is that 86% of employees and executives cite the lack of effective collaboration and communication as the primary cause of workplace failures. This is Fierce Conversations and Quantum Workplace Survey. So if we're talking 86% recognize how critical communication is to your business, to your bottom line, and to the well-being of your employees, we need to talk about it today. So I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, longtime colleague, friend of mine back from college days. We work together all the time. The HR Leaders Coach, Susan Nelson. Welcome to Control-Alt-Delete with Lisa Duerre.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Whoop, whoop. Hey, she's here, right? So
Uh,
we've been talking about this for years. We know, even when we did our senior project back in the day, right? Communication matters. So
it
what are your
does.
thoughts on this 86% of employees citing this lack of communication as a primary cause of workplace failure? What are you seeing? What are your thoughts?
At first you think, oh, that's a staggering number, right? But it's like, it makes sense. So much of what we do and everything that we do in the workplace comes back to communication. And I can think about as an HR person, when things went south, it was because of a misunderstanding or, a miscommunication of some sort was behind the root issue of what was happening in that case. And so it's like, I always think, gosh, communication is so critical and we can't ignore it. We've got to be thinking about how do we show up as leaders with our teams and communicating effectively and mindfully.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, you put the mindful right in there. I love it so much because listen, I keep it real here, as we know. I'm not always great at this. This is
yes.
something that I have to keep my muscle memory alive. I have to allow myself a moment to pause, to kind of tune in with myself, sometimes remember to breathe. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
Lately, I've been feeling really reactionary. I'll be focused on something, the phone will ring or somebody needs something, and I almost find myself resenting it sometimes.
Mm.
And I'm seeing this in the clients I work with as well. I'm not alone. And Danielle, thank you for being here. Yeah, I love that too, right? Mindfulness.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that really comes to mind for me is if I am an executive coach, a speaker, a burnout prevention expert, and I'm struggling on some
Mhm.
day, I think we need to talk about it, Susan. So,
Absolutely.
one of the things I was thinking about as you and I were talking is just transitions in seasons and lifetimes, right? So, for many people right now, it's back to school. For other groups, maybe it's elder care. Maybe you're in a health crisis, there's more appointments than normal. There's
Mhm.
always something behind the Zoom screen that could impact how you show up as a leader, how you communicate, and what may be triggering you or depleting you from a resource standpoint, which is, I know for me, when I get a little bit reactionary. Well, but sometimes a lot. Just curious, can we keep it real here for a second? What's happening in your world?
Oh, yeah. Well, back to school is top of mind for me. Just in the last week, my daughter started high school, if you can believe
Wow.
that.
Mhm,
And that was a much bigger transition than I anticipated. And it caused both of us to become very reactionary and I had to really step back and tap into what I've been learning about for a lot of my career and more recently, I would say in the last few years, really getting into a mindfulness practice about how I can ground myself. And I'll give a perfect example. um, my standard has always been, hey, how was your day? And so she comes home from high school, first day of high school. It was terrible. It was the worst day ever. Blah 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 blah. And of course, I want to get into inquiry of like, oh well, what happened? And so I had to take a step back because what I find with her in particular is when she matches my energies or I match her energy. So
mhm,
she's coming at it from that standpoint of reactionary, don't talk to me, very negative. Then I start to kind of it's this vicious cycle. So
mhm,
what I realized was like, okay, I got to give her some space, let her go in her room and decompress from whatever happened during the day. And then, I approach her later, at dinner time or whenever she's ready to engage, not necessarily talk, but engage,
mhm,
and come up with something other than how was your day, right? And sometimes what I found, she actually also started cross country too. So she was having some pain in her hip or whatever, and she had mentioned that to me one day. And what I did was I kind of came full circle and asked her something about, hey, how's your hip doing? Something not academically related,
mhm,
or how was your day? Because that's where I find that she's able to respond and get back to me of like, oh yeah, I'm doing better. And sometimes she'll even open up further than with, oh, and by the way, I have this question, or it's really kind of this opener to kind of create that space for her. And what I found is over last week or so, a lot of what she wants to be heard.
mhm,
She just wants to be heard. And I'm a very much a communicator of, I'm curious, I want to know all the things, and I ask a lot of questions. And for her, the recipient, it's, oh, you're pinging me all the time with all these, you're pelting me with questions. It's overwhelming. And I'm speaking as her, she's already overwhelmed enough as it is with all the transitions that she's going through. So it's like, can you just, and I really am now taking the approach of listening with intent, right? And really
mhm,
understanding her body language too. Is this something that's really, got you down, or is there something more serious here, or am I just here to listen? And 99% of the time, it's just she wants to be heard without me commentating at all.
mhm,
And I think that's true of a lot of our employees too. If I think relating it back to the workplace, employees just want to be heard. Don't underestimate the power in helping them feel heard, right? Through active listening. It's a super powerful tool. It's super hard to do in the moment, right? And especially when we've got constant distractions around us, right? Your phone's pinging, you're stressed out about a meeting that's coming up, or what have you. But really trying to, using mindfulness practices to help you stay grounded when something important does come up, so that you can stay in that moment with them, and really, whether it's working through it or just helping them know that you care, right? You care enough to
mhm.
stay in that moment with them and really listen. So that was one that's come up more recently for me. And I'm thinking about, how does this, relate back to the workplace? And that's definitely the tie-in for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, first of all, thank you for sharing a personal story, right? This is how we learn because we can see ourselves in other people's stories. Danielle
Mhm.
had a comment on here that says, I feel that so deeply. Great insight. So Danielle, thank you for chatting. And if you're with us live, drop in your insights too. Like this is an interactive conversation where we're going to learn from and with each other. And I think if I could summarize what I heard you say, Susan, is, curiosity is a superpower. And sometimes when it's overdone, it's an annoyance. Right? I mean, I'm
Yes.
a curious person. I want to know.
Mhm.
I practice appreciative inquiry. I've got life-giving questions. These are the coolest things ever. And sometimes people are like, I need quiet. I need to think.
Yeah.
I need to regroup. And the other thing I heard you say that I think is for me really a great reminder, even in the moment right now, is that mindfulness, right? When we say mindful in our firm model, it doesn't mean you're going on a yoga retreat. It simply means you're tuning in. You're aware
Right.
of your triggers. You're asking yourself, where am I right now? Am I closed and bitter and
Mhm.
frustrated? Am I open and
Yeah.
curious? Right. So mindfulness doesn't mean you got to leave the building to go catch yourself. It's simply taking 3 deep breaths and being curious enough to check in on yourself. Right.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think it's also reflectionary and being okay with a do-over. Like you gave your daughter
Mm.
time, right? So
Yes.
let's say you're in a meeting and there's, the tape out's not working or the bug really blew it and your main customer is all pissed off and you leave that meeting and your boss like, how did it go? And it went awful, right? Wait, whoa,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Your boss
Yeah.
might need to say, hey, you want to take 10 minutes and let's debrief that? Maybe grab a cup of
Yeah.
coffee or what, like there's a way to just
Yeah.
even read the, like you said, the body language. So I think
Right.
it's funny because we don't have to look very far for examples of what I'll call a high point story
Mhm.
versus a depreciative experience and be reminded of how to show up to be the
Yeah.
best communicator you can. And sometimes
Absolutely.
it's calling your own time out.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I love the example that you gave where sometimes it's even removing yourself from the environment can make all the difference, right? So
Mhm.
in my daughter's case, going into her room is sort of her safe space where she can just kind of decompress. But in the workplace, it's like, yeah, let's get out of the building and assuming you're in a building together,
Yeah.
but go to the coffee shop next door or more of a neutral place
Mhm.
because our bodies react to if we just had this bad experience in the office or a negative experience, we separating ourselves from that can really go a long way in kind of resetting our brain and just kind of shaking it off a little bit to be able to have that productive conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
environment
it's
makes a
such
big
a
difference.
pattern interrupt, right? A pattern interrupt is a great thing. It doesn't mean that,
Yeah.
sometimes I would just walk outside and look up at a tree and like, okay, all right,
Right.
what are the stories I'm telling myself? How am I reacting? Is this aligned with how I want to show up in the world? Right. One of
Yes.
my favorite questions is, how do I want to feel? I mean, we asked before we
Mm,
started, how do you want to feel when we're done? Right. So
mhm,
being intentional about the energy you're bringing to a situation and
for
honestly
sure.
practicing that do over is huge.
Yeah.
I see a comment here from Danielle. I'm so glad you're here
Yeah.
communicating with us. Let's see what we say. Oh, yeah, Susan. So making people feel heard is a huge gift. Great reminder, Susan. Letting people share until they're completely done with just validation and care. Oh, tell me more about that. It's a great way. Yeah,
Yes. Agreed.
definitely see that. Yeah. It's funny when I facilitate, when someone does a share, they'll do a debrief of a breakout room, and they're heartfelt talking about something hard or like intense.
Mhm.
My question is always like, "Are you complete with that share? Is there more that you'd like to
Mm,
say?" Right? And I always get comments from people like, "Thank you for checking in and not," because people don't want to feel cut off,
right.
you
Yep.
know? And it's also
Yeah.
as a leader, you can't let them go on forever. So, do you feel complete, or what else? What one more sentence will make you feel complete means you can actually capture it too without, giving
Yes.
up all their
And
time.
I love that wording too, and the model that you set for maybe anybody else who's in the room, right? Listening
Mhm.
and wow, what a great phrase to use with people to allow them to feel complete and yet
Yeah.
not take away time from, other things that maybe need to get done in that meeting. So love that.
It's an interesting question too, because I often think sometimes people just think they have to keep filling space and keep talking. So, do you feel complete? It's like, "Oh, I'm good," right? When I
Yes,
learned this was when I was on Clubhouse all the time because they can't see you, and you'd have to
right.
say, "And with that, I'm complete," and I just was like, "This is game
That's
changer,"
awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is.
I'm gonna bring another statistic up in our conversation, okay? So, 71% of employees are more productive when their workplace practices mindful communication, and this is from the American Psychological Association, and seeing Danielle's comments and hearing your
Mhm.
story, I think the question I wanna ask the listener, right, who's here right now is, what is your mindful communication practice? How do you give yourself the space, the time, um, to check in? And what are you doing in your team meetings? How are you
Mhm.
modeling mindfulness, right? Um,
Mhm.
one of the things that I really, really wish I was better at, and I tend to lean into other people on our team for, is just kicking off the meeting with a moment of mindfulness. I'm
Mhm.
really good at connecting to purpose. Like, why is this meeting important? What do we need to accomplish? But there are other people that I work with that simply will say, let's just do 3 deep breaths together. Or, hey, why don't we jot down anything we're worried we're going to forget so that we can be fully present in this conversation? Right.
Mhm.
Or sometimes if it's an email, it might be like, what else is you think is on their mind when this email hits the inbox? What's your subject line? So,
Mhm.
Susan, what do you want to add
Yeah.
to just practicing mindful communication? What are some thoughts you have?
Yeah, I love that. And I'm part of a work group right now where we start with a mindful grounding exercise. And of course, we're, leaders in facilitation. So a lot of us are,
Mhm.
accustomed to that. But I could see as a leader, even in a tech organization, I think there's much greater acceptance of starting meetings this way, especially when where a lot of us might be working in hybrid environments or even all remote, giving people that chance to, they probably just came off of another meeting, had got 10 action items out of that meeting, and they just need that small space to be able to really be present. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, what happens is they're in your meeting and they're not paying attention to what you're talking about or
Mhm.
doing or why we're even here, and it becomes very inefficient. So even if you just give people that first 2 3 minutes, and maybe it's doing deep breathing, whatever is comfortable for you. But I think a lot of people, s- I think in the beginning people were surprised that employees were open to doing this, but
Mhm.
just to do it, pause, notice, choose. Let's do some either deep breathing or find something in your environment and stare at it for a few seconds, right? But just
Right?
you, engaging your senses so that you can, or feel your chair underneath you, right? Like
Mhm.
feel deeply or rub your fingers together, whatever it is, to get into
Mhm.
your body and out of your head, because that's where we live all the time in corporate work, is get into your body so that you can actually feel your your surroundings, where you are. Okay, now I'm ready to pay attention. And I love your idea about even just jot the few things down that you think you might forget so that it can get out of your head,
Mhm.
and you can really then be focused on, okay, I am fully present for this conversation. And honestly, I feel like groups that do this extremely well, their meetings are probably 50% the length of what they used to be.
Mhm.
Because if you can get everyone, and I know this is hard, especially when you have big groups, but if you can get everyone in that meeting focused and focus at the task at hand, whatever that might be. It could just be sharing information or decision making, but whatever it is, I think you get through these things much more efficiently. And people appreciate that, especially when
Mhm.
they know they're in back to back meetings all day with very little breaks. It's like, hey, let's give you the gift of time and you can decompress a little bit before your next meeting. And I think that's extremely powerful. But yeah, finding that thing that, whether, and maybe you even become known for it in your organization. It's like, oh, I really enjoy going to Lisa's meetings because I know we're going to start with a little bit of purpose, but grounding, right? To kind of make
Yeah.
sure that we're all here in the sense of
Yeah.
not just physically, but emotionally.
Oh, it's so interesting, Susan, because the purpose question, right? It some people are like, what? Well, duh, this is our job. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like when you connect to purpose, like
Mhm.
thinking about your customers or why the business exists or what you make, the impact you need to make in the world or why this meeting matters. It's a
Mhm.
really great way to kind of laser focus people into the now and to get present. And it's funny because I think purpose for many clients that I work with, when I say, let's start with a purpose question, they look at me like I'm speaking Greek, right? And I'm like, no, no, no.
Uh-huh.
It's just,
Yeah.
why is this important? What's our intended outcome? Why are we dedicating this time? What do we hope to get out of it, right? And why does this matter to each person? And I think that that's a real big gift to ask yourself as a leader. And the second thing I just want to say, and this is me, like, I'm gonna look straight in the camera, is you leading a meeting, not you, Susan. Hey, leader, leading the
Mhm.
meeting with your laptop open and not looking at the camera, or your camera off and thinking everyone's engaged, you're the model. So mindful communication might mean you got to change some of those habits of multitasking or being on call for everything that happens. Look at your schedule, look at the time, shorten your meetings, figure out how can you be present so people feel seen and heard, and you're modeling what it means to be in the moment, because I
Absolutely.
mean, how many meetings I'm like, they're on their
Oh, it's
laptops and no
shocking.
one's
Yeah.
looking. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
I
let's see.
think
Stacy's here. Stacy says, why the meeting matters is always helpful to say out loud. Right, Stacy? Yeah.
huge.
We're here together and this matters because. And I think that's
Absolutely.
true for the email. I'm sending you this email because, right? Like being more clear. What does Brene Brown say? Clear is kind, right? Let's
Mhm.
be transparent and intentional with our conversations. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Susan, comments on Stacy?
Yeah, I love that, and I agree, and I think it also sets an expectation of, perhaps people come into the same meeting with different agendas, right?
Mhm.
And so it's great to get that out in the open because I think sometimes people think we're here for one reason, and then when the conversation starts going, you're like, wait a minute, you clearly have a different idea. But if you get that alignment in the beginning of the meeting, wow, how much more
Mhm.
powerful will that and efficient will that meeting be? So I love that, and why it matters and why we're here. What's our purpose? Why
Yeah.
but I love the deeper meaning behind why it matters, right? Because I think
Mhm.
we sometimes get into the surface level. Oh, we go to these meetings because our boss told us we had to go to this meeting, But
Mhm.
okay, really, why are we here, and what difference is it going to make? And if you find that you're answering that question consistently and you don't know the meaning behind it, you need to raise that up and really challenge whoever is inviting you. Maybe you don't need to be going to this meeting anymore because it doesn't serve you or anybody you work with. I'm always amazed at how many people attend meetings without agendas,
Yep.
and they don't understand the purpose. It's like we get into this routine of just, oh well, I go to that meeting because it's a stand-up meeting that we have every week, and it's like, well, maybe you should start questioning that a little bit.
For sure. It's funny, you guys. I really appreciate the interaction that's coming through. I think we've hit a hot button, Susan. This is going to be really good.
We definitely
One
have,
of the
yes.
one of the things I think that is so interesting. Let's look at what Sarah says. Sarah, we're so glad you're here. So I like to summarize in a bullet or two at the top of the email or the agenda, and if further detail is needed, provide it below. That way, there's a focus statement at the top. I appreciate that, Sarah. I love to know bullet points. It's so helpful. Um, Yes, and then Stacy's saying, alignment is an underrated advantage to success. Oh my God, that's a blog post. Stacy, I hope there's a blog post coming out of this from you. Alignment is an underrated advantage to success. Yeah. And yet
Mhm.
one of the things that's coming up for me when I'm working, so we're doing right now, there's a lot of reorgs going on. We're designing offsites and we're, working on clients' North Stars or purpose, realigning teams that have been completely changed up from, how they're structured to who their leaders are. And I'm seeing leaders, feeling stuck, right?
Mm.
Like there's so much change fatigue and so many
Yeah.
moving parts and everything's important. And the thing that I'm noticing in the communication is they feel like they have to do it all by themselves. Right. I'm
Mm.
going to write the email. I'm going to do this. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, how might you invite some trusted people, whether it's your HR leader that we know
Mhm.
Susan works with all the time, a chief of staff, a peer, a colleague around there to help you kind of stay in a curiosity mode so that your
Mhm.
communication can hit the mark. Because unfortunately, the person who is in charge of this, not everybody's telling you what's really going on or what they're thinking about or what
Right.
they're worried about. I mean, we just ran a leadership forum kickoff, and the question was, why is it important to be here? The purpose question. And some of them came back out and said, we don't even understand the vision for this reorg. So I can't tell
Yep.
you why it's important to be here. And I was like, yes, they're presencing that. This was amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I really just want to invite any leader who's leading change
Mhm.
from a mindful communication standpoint, who can you enlist that can give you some perspective or run your communication by, or even the stories you're telling yourself about what you think the organization is thinking and feeling? I'm sure, Susan, you see this all the time. So, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, yeah, I feel like the more voices or perspectives, I guess, the more perspectives you can bring to this, how you're managing all this, the better. Because you're right, as a sole leader, you're not going to know what people are really thinking or seeing, and especially when it's something that maybe is highly emotional, like a reorganization, or their world's turned upside down and we're doing things completely different. People are worried about their jobs or what have you. You're not going to always hear the real deal. And I think with time and being a more mindful communicator, and pulling in more perspectives, I think with time, people that builds a lot of trust with employees, right? And then they'll start sharing maybe a little bit more with you or more candidly in certain, scenarios, to kind of say, hey, that really didn't land well for people, or
Mhm.
how could you, do that differently next time? And I think as a leader who is open to that feedback and really listens and does something with the feedback, you become that trusted person. And I think
Mhm.
employees really do appreciate that. And those leaders tend to be far and few between, because we don't stop long enough to pay attention to what is being said and what's not being said. It's like reading between the lines, right? And if we're so worried about the next thing, or oh, I've got to go to this meeting and that meeting, it's like, no, 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 no. You actually need to slow way, 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 way down
Mhm.
and start, I'll call reading the tea leaves, but like, you've got to be paying attention to a lot more than what's just being said in the meetings that you're in. It's what's happening in between the meetings. Who's saying what, and it's not it's not gossip. I'm not talking about that, but it's just really getting the sentiment of what's happening in your organization takes mindfulness
Yeah.
and time to do. And so I'm always encouraging leaders to shed as much as you can off your plate, and have, in terms of the doing, because
Mhm.
the higher up you go, it's more of your role is about the listening and paying attention and connecting the dots and going, oh wow, okay, and inviting more of those perspectives and conversations in. That's the job. And I think that's where a lot of senior leaders get hung up, is they're so busy running the rat race and doing all the things, and they
Mhm.
think that's what's going to get them further ahead. But the success, really, their success and the organization's success lies in the true listening and true paying attention to what's going on, and that's a big part of communication.
Yeah. I'm going to do a couple things with the time we have left. First, I'm going to say that one of the, if I can give everyone here something to write down, I would say that what I've learned is you can't be reactive if you're being curious.
Mm,
Right. So if you're staying curious, like what's going on, or what am I missing, or what are people not saying, or how is this landing? It's really hard to get defensive and reactive. Right. So I
mhm,
just want to
mhm,
invite everybody to think about this from a mindful communication standpoint. Are you landing in curiosity or reactivity? Because that's gonna where you aim the car, it goes. Right. So that's one
right.
thing. The second thing I want to say is I have a couple other ideas to interrupt your patterns. The first is to reach out and connect. So I would call Susan, right? I've called Susan. Oh my gosh, this one, what do you think of this? Right. So connect with someone, get out of your head and find a safe place to talk. The second is change your physical perspective, which Susan mentioned. The third is how might you resource yourself? What brings you energy? What helps
Mm,
relax you? How do you then, tune back in to resource yourself? And the other is move your body. And I mean,
mm,
we did a workshop with a group of sales leaders, male sales leaders, and we had them doing qigong. Okay. They were banging the temple. They were
uh,
blithering. They were doing everything. They wanted to have the best quarter they had. And we wanted to get all the stress out so they could be present to plan. And it was phenomenal. But, they were moving their body. Now, do you need to do Qigong? No, you take a walk, go to the gym. I don't know, walk on a treadmill at your desk, whatever. But moving your body can get you back into a more mindful state. So there's a couple of tips as we go through this, and we've had so much interaction today with Danielle and Sarah and Stacy. Thank you so much for your insights and heart here, Susan. I'd love to ask you two questions as we wrap up today.
sure.
What's one thing you'd like the leader to be inspired to take action to do, or what comes to mind? Maybe jot something down. And I also,
Mm,
before you answer that, I want to ask you about a song. Because one of the things I know to be mindful for me is, and I know the impact of music from a neuroscience standpoint, what song comes to mind that might even be a gift to the audience today?
For me, the song that comes up, and I think about, how I leverage my own strengths in my work, is the song "Rise Up" by Andrew Day. Remember that?
Rise up.
Rise up, and it's,
Oh,
you know what I'm,
and I
you know the song.
rise up.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
yes,
I love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So for me, it's about perseverance and lifting others up, right? And staying strong in the face of challenges that come, because there's always going to be some next new challenge that comes along. But for me, it's okay. How do I would do Clifton strengths. So my strengths are achiever, responsibility, harmony, relator, and for me, it's I think that song really speaks to that I'm a leader who obviously likes to achieve goals, supports others, but I like, I take a certain amount of responsibility for, not only myself, but the teams that I lead. And so, I think of that song about, just not just me rising up, but helping others to rise too.
Mm.
So yeah, that's just one of my
I can
favorites.
feel it. I see it. It's going on the playlist. I want to drop
Oh,
a quick note. Stacy said, thank you. She's got to go to her next meeting, but this was a great break in her day. And I think that's a really good point that in 30 minutes or less, reflecting on where you are, how might you be mindful? What's next? What a gift to your organization, right? So Stacy, thank you for your comment. And Susan, I'd love to just leave it with you.
yeah.
What's one thing people can do, one thing people could think about, or just a gift to the audience as we wrap up this concept and this topic today about mindful communication?
I think the one thing I would say is start small and start somewhere, right? Like it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It could just be you could start with just yourself and maybe there's a practice that you incorporate, before you step into every meeting and it could just be, box breathing or for a minute or what have you. But I think when more employees see you actually employing whatever that one thing is, they might ask you about it. And then I would just encourage you to be open and say, "Oh yeah, I'm running around all day, and as I get into new meetings, I've got to reset, and that's how I reset myself." Or it could be, I go take a walk from my desk down to wherever and back, and or why do you take the long way to the conference room, right? It's well,
Mhm.
I've got it. I need these spaces for myself. So figure out what that one thing is for you. And I love the idea of getting out in nature if you can do it, but find out that thing and really you are the influence in your organization and you can influence from the top but you can also influence from lower levels in the organization too because when people see things that work they emulate them and I think you can be that influential leadership at any level of the organization and really sometimes even if you're in a skeptical workplace where they're like oh mindfulness oh that's not really us that's a little touchy feely
Mhm.
just do it anyway, and you could do it in very subtle ways too. It doesn't have to be very overt, but if people notice you doing these things, like, "How do you seem so calm and collected?" And,
Mhm.
and creating those safe spaces for people to integrate mindfulness into their day, I think is really gonna be, becomes more routine, and that's really gonna make all the difference in your organizations.
Mm. Well, this is why I love talking to you, and I'm sure everyone who's listening to you knows the wealth of information Susan Nelson drops in one answer is, you can write a book. Susan, you are an amazing coach, leader, friend, college buddy, entrepreneur, mom, sister. I mean, you are a light in this world. I really appreciate the one small thing because we can do that. We can all do one small thing. So if you're looking for support for your HR team, you want to contact Susan. She is a phenomenal HR leaders coach. We do work together at RLD Group as well, and we have fun together. So
Mm,
if you want to keep this conversation alive, we'd love to know what you'd like to do, how we might support you. But hey, replay is up. Take it into your team meeting, bring it to your family dinner, like, share, subscribe. Like we're doing this for you and for us and for all of us today. Thank you for participating. Susan, thank you for bringing your heart and your experience. And
thank
we'll
you.
see you next time on Control Alt Delete with Lisa Duerre. Take care, everyone. That's a wrap, folks. Whether you're here with us live for the reboot or caught the replay to upgrade your leadership drive, I want to say a big thank you for being a part of this experience. Your input and energy are what keep us going strong. But hold on tight, this isn't where the journey ends. Let's keep the momentum going by sharing your thoughts in the comments, spreading the word on social media, or dropping me a message. I'm all ears and ready to connect. And hey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button or ring the bell so you don't miss our next episode. If today sparked something for you, your likes and comments mean the world. They help us reach more leaders like yourself and prevent burnout. Together, we're not just leaders, we're firm leaders, upgrading our drive and rebooting our leadership game one episode at a time. Oh, and one more thing. If you're interested in bringing this valuable discussion to your teams or organization, RLD Group is here to lend a hand. Reach out via LinkedIn or email hello@rldgroupllc.com. We'd love to chat. Until next time, this is Lisa Duerre signing off with a virtual high five and or a virtual fist bump, whatever you choose. Make it a great day, everyone.